Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a look at the longest running production shotgun and the only shotgun that was produced before World War II, still in production today, the Ithaca 37. Now today I want to talk about the very interesting origin and history of this gun and how it came to be. Also want to talk about some different variations as well as features, and then also take it out to the course so we can break some clays with it. Now with that being said, let's dive right on in. All right, so today we've got a 1952 Ithaca Model 37 Featherlight. Now this is a 12 gauge pump action shotgun. It's got a 28-inch barrel and it's got a fixed full choke. Now the first thing you're going to notice is that this does not have a side ejection port, and that's because this is a bottom loading and bottom ejecting shotgun. Now, before I get too far into some of the different variations and features of this gun, I do want to share the origin and the history and story behind this gun. So let's do that first, then we'll take a look at this gun and take it out to the range. Now, in order to share the full story, I actually have to go back to 1908. And if you remember, we actually did a video on this gun. This is the Remington Model 10, and this was designed by John Pedersen, early 1900s, and this was basically Remington's very first pump action shotgun, and this too is a bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun. So, you know, this was a 1908 design. I think this is like a 1911 that we've got here, but very old shotgun, but very dependable, and for the longest time it was one of the pump action shotguns to have. Basically, John Browning noticed that John Pedersen had made this design, and even though that John Browning was very successful in making the Winchester 1897 as well as the FN or Browning Auto 5 design, he had not made a bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun. So he actually really admired John Pedersen and his design and wanted to make one of his own. So basically the next step here, going into the 1914, 1915, John Browning himself actually designed his own bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun in 1915, and actually patented it in 1915, and it was sold there a little later in like 1917 to Remington. And that actually is this. This is the Remington Model 17, and this too is a bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun, pump action. As you can see, they're all clear. But these actually only came in 20 gauge and they were super lightweight guns. However, like I said, these were designed in 1915. They were patented in 1915. However, with World War I and our involvement in that, Remington actually didn't get to start producing these until 1921. So that actually put a little bit of time in there, right? And because it was a Remington model and John Pedersen was that designer for Remington, there was some time in between where John Browning and John Pedersen actually got to work on this model and, make some improvements, make some adjustments, between that 1917, 1921, and that actually extended out some of the patents. So that then takes us into the late 1920s. And the Model 17 basically was pretty popular in the 20s. The Winchester Model 12 was a side ejecting pump action shotgun, and that basically was the gun to have, and it was the most popular gun at the time. So Remington, around the late 20s, they quickly evolved and they changed that design into a side ejecting pump action shotgun, which was then dubbed the Model 31. Now, we have videos on the Model 10, the Model 17, as well as the Winchester Model 12, and the Model 31 for that matter. So definitely check those out because we have those videos on our channel in our catalog there. But today we're talking about the Ithaca Model 37. So that takes us to, like I said, 1929, 1930. And Ithaca was an American gun company, and they wanted to compete directly with the Winchester Model 12. So they were actually taking a look at existing shotgun designs that maybe had some patents that were going to be expiring soon, and that's when they actually discovered the Remington Model 17, or the 1915 patent of John Browning. So Harry Howland, who was a designer for Ithaca, went to the board and he made some changes, some adjustments. He made some changes with the firing pin, with the ejection system, and by 1933, he basically had the Ithaca Model 33. And it was basically ready to produce and sell. However, what Ithaca didn't realize at that time is that when John Browning and John Pedersen made those adjustments, leading up to 1921's release of the Model 17, that also created some new patents and extended those patents. So in reality, those patents were in place until 1937. And even though they had a gun ready to go in 1933, they had to wait those 4 years before they could finally, release it and produce it and sell it to the public there. So technically, this could have been a 1933 gun. However, it didn't come out until 1937. So a lot of history there, spanning from 1908 all the way to 1937. And if you guys are still watching, I definitely appreciate it. But hey, that's what this channel is all about, sharing some cool history with you guys, as well as taking these out to have some fun and break some clays. So with that being said, now let's quick talk about some of the variations as well as some of the features of this gun, and then we'll wrap it up by taking it out to the range. Okay, so let's talk about some of the variations and the features on the Ithaca Model 37. Now, this gun comes in 12 gauge, 16 gauge, 20 gauge, and 28 gauge, and it has barrels ranging from 13 inches all the way up to 30 inches with all different sorts of chokes and things like that, especially on those sporting models. Now, it's been in production for 88 years, right? So there is pretty much a model for any kind of discipline, whether you are hunting birds or large game, or you're using it for trap shooting or sporting clay shooting or skeet shooting, or just for self-defense. There is probably a Model 37 for you. So I'm not going to go into so many of the different variations because there are so many of them out there over the last 88 years. But it's good to know that if you're looking for one of these, you will probably find one of what you're trying to use it for. Now, another quite a cool feature of this gun is, I already mentioned it's bottom loading, bottom ejecting. So, if you are a left-handed shooter or something like that, you don't have to worry about getting a left-handed gun because the shells eject from the bottom of the receiver. That is one thing to note. Another thing that's kind of cool about this gun is that it actually is a slam fire capable design. So what that means is you can fire your first round, and as you pump the gun, you are feeding shells and they are firing basically. So that is a slam fire option, and those pretty much are made all the way up until 1975 or so. And then after that, they did make some corrections, and not all of them after 1975 are slam fire. But the earlier models from 37 up to about 75 do have that kind of cool feature if you're into that. Now, another thing is that, like I said, they didn't make too many guns of bottom loading, bottom ejecting, and because of that, we are really glad that Ithaca and Harry Howland did put this design out there, especially in the different chambers and all the different variations, because otherwise we wouldn't have too many options. So now I want to go a little bit into the Ithaca 37, take it out to the range, talk about how it feels, how it shoots, and then also compare it to another very popular bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun, the Browning BPS. Okay, so we've got a 1952 Ithaca Model 37 Featherlight in 12 gauge here today. This does have a 28-inch barrel with the fixed full choke. Now, this is a Featherlight model, and this one comes in at 6 pounds, 13 ounces, which is very lightweight for a 12 gauge shotgun. So this definitely would be a joy to carry in the field, especially for upland hunting. As well as it's, bottom loading, bottom ejecting, so you don't have to worry about shells flying out the side. At the same time, the action is very smooth on this gun, and it operates pretty much flawlessly. We took it out to the clay range. We're shooting 8-shot target loads, and it ran no problem at all, and it actually handled recoil pretty well, considering it was only 6 pounds, 13 ounces. Now, I personally don't have a lot of time behind this gun. I actually prefer the Remington 870. So although I don't have a lot of time behind this gun, if I was in the market to get a bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun, it's either going to be the Ithaca 37 or the Browning BPS or Browning pump shotgun. Those are really the two out there that have stood the test of time. I mean, this one's been in production for 88 years. The Browning BPS came out in the late 70s. And those are really the two shotguns that I personally would be looking at that have that reputation. So let's talk about some of the differences. So I already mentioned that this gun, the Featherlight at least, comes in at 6 pounds, 13 ounces, whereas the BPS comes in at a lot heavier. It actually comes in starting at around 7 pounds, 12 ounces, and I've seen them go as high as 8 pounds, 4 ounces, especially if they shoot the 3.5-inch shells. So definitely a big difference there. And even by looks and aesthetics, the Model 37 is just a thinner, slimmer, faster design, whereas that BPS is going to be a larger, chunkier, heavier design. So it really depends on, what you're using them for. A couple other differences here is that the Ithaca 37 does have a crossbolt safety, whereas the BPS has a tank safety. So for left-handed shooters, not only are you getting that ejection out of the bottom, but you can also use your left thumb easily to take that safety on and off. Lastly, the Ithaca 37 is made right here in America and pretty much, well, actually has always been made here in America, whereas the Browning BPS, although it was discontinued in 2024, it was always made in Japan at the Moroku plant. So those are some of the key differences between the two guns. However, again, if you're at the point where you're like, I want to get a bottom loading, bottom ejecting pump action shotgun, and I just don't know what I want, I really think you're going to have to look at what are you primarily going to be using it for. And the reason why is just because they are different, even though that the action is the same essentially on them. Now, for me personally, if I was going to be out in the field, especially upland hunting and doing a lot of walking, I'm going to grab the Ithaca 37 because, like I said, it's super lightweight, it's super fast, and at the same time it handles recoil very well. Whereas if I'm doing some trap shooting or sporting clays shooting, or even like some hunting for like turkey where I'm not doing a lot of walking or anything like that, I'm probably going to choose the Browning BPS because I do like that it is heavier, it handles recoil better, and it's also bigger, so it gives me just more to hold on to and gives me more control over the gun. So those are some of the things that I'm looking at in those two applications. However, for self-defense, you're not going to find me with either of these guns. You're going to find me with a Remington 870, especially a police model, because that's just going to be my go-to pump gun for that application. In fact, let's be honest, even if you see me out in the field hunting, or if you see me on the sporting clays course and I've got a pump gun in my hand, it's likely going to be a Remington 870. It's just my personal preference. But if you are looking for that bottom loading, bottom ejecting shotgun, you really can't go wrong with the Ithaca 37. Like I said, it's been around for 88 years. It's still in production today. They come in many different chambers, many different barrel sizes, applications, and they've really stood the test of time for quality and reputation, and definitely a good gun to have in your collection, and a lot of history behind it as we shared earlier in the video. Now, as always, we're always very lucky to get our hands on these guns and share it all with you today. We really appreciate all of your support, and if you like what we're doing here, please take the time. Like, subscribe, and ring that bell so you can get notifications of all of our future content. With that being said though, this is Scott signing off with The Average Joe's Armory, channel for the average Joe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.